How They Croaked by Georgia Bragg. Galileo. Galileo was the smartest guy in the room. He knew this, and so did everybody else. Most people couldn't even read and were just trying to get food on the table, while Galileo was walking around asking himself questions like, what is the speed of falling things? And how can I calculate longitude at sea? Then he'd figure out the answers himself. Galileo thought the earth spun around the sun. The teachings of the Catholic Church were against the idea of the earth moving. And thinking something like that, what Galileo thought, could get a person killed back then, but it took a lot to kill Galileo. He was a mathematics professor for 20 years. In his day, professors lived with their students. Galileo gave out entertaining assignments like, why does the ice float in wine? And then he drank the experiment. He figured out how to make a military compass that ensured cannonballs hit their targets. Galileo, the big man on campus, eventually became known the world over as the father of modern science. Galileo was also the biological father of 3 illegitimate children. He never married, and the mother of his children died young. He sent his 2 daughters to a nunnery, and his son went to law school. In the 1500s, nobody lived long. If you made it to 35 years of age, you were lucky. Because of plagues, poxes, and every other unimaginable nightmare that doctors didn't know how to cure, people dropped like flies. At 45, when Galileo had outlived most of his peers, he got his hands on the first telescope, which didn't work much better than squinting through a paper towel roll. He improved the magnification of 30, about as powerful as one you can find today in any toy store. Then he pointed the thing at the sky and actually discovered something. It was common knowledge that Jupiter existed, but Galileo was the first to see Jupiter's 4 moons, and he saw dark spots on the sun. Watching all these heavenly bodies, Galileo realized something was moving. Us. The earth was moving around the sun. In his own body, something else was moving. His kidney stones. Crystallized uric acid slowly came out through his urine, and it felt like there were burning asteroids in his groin. The problem was Galileo drank wine and never water. At the time, wine was considered safer to drink than water. More burning meteorites developed in his feet and knees, which was a disease called gout. It deformed his hands into claws with lumpy knuckles, twisted fingers, and raw skin. It didn't matter how smart he was, he didn't know that the lead added to his wine as flavoring was poisonous, as was the lead that leached from the metal casks the wine was cured in. He drank a lot of lead-laced wine. It gave him headaches, anemia, and rotten teeth. Galileo was barely getting around when he sat down to write his book about the sun-centered universe called Dialogue Concerning the 2 Chief World Systems. He had a hole in his stomach muscle where his intestine bulged out, called a hernia. A heavy iron contraption called a truss was trapped on him every day to plug the hole. He saw a large halo around any light he looked at, and within the halo he saw nothing because of eye infections and what we now know as glaucoma. None of this stopped him from writing. But what was he thinking? The last guy who mentioned a sun-centered universe was burned at the stake by the church police, the holy office of the Inquisition. The Inquisition had the power to hunt down people who believed something different from the teachings of the Catholic Church. These people were called heretics, and sometimes they were tortured and put to death. Still, Galileo published his book. He believed it would be his ticket to immortality. The leaders of the Inquisition called Galileo in for a trial. Who did he think he was? When Galileo got to the trial, he was definitely the smartest guy in the room. But that wouldn't impress the Inquisitioners, so he played dumb. That didn't stop them from finding him guilty of heresy, rejecting the beliefs of those in power. He was sentenced to death as a lesson to others. But Galileo was smart enough to know he didn't need to die to make the truth more true. So Galileo told them what they wanted to hear. Sorry, I take that back. As a result, his sentence was reduced to life imprisonment. He was 70 years old and looking more dead than alive. The Council of the Inquisition let him go home under house arrest. Young science students moved in with him, just like old times, and Galileo got back to work. He eventually went completely blind and everything hurt, so his students had to carry him around in a chair, but he kept working. He lived for another 7 years. Eventually, the lead poisoning got to him. Galileo died of kidney failure on January 8, 1642, in Arcetri, Italy. He was 77 years old. He had lived the equivalent of 2 lifetimes. Because of the Inquisition, Galileo wasn't allowed to have a fancy funeral. He was buried in a small closet in the Basilica of St. Croce. 95 years later, the world of science caught up with Galileo, and his remains were moved to a big marble monument in the church. While they were at it, some fans removed a vertebrae, a tooth, and 3 fingers from Galileo's right hand. Galileo's middle finger is on display at the Museum of the History of Science in Florence, Italy. Engraved below his middle finger are the words, "This is the finger belonging to the illustrious hand that ran through the skies, pointing at the immense spaces and singling out new stars." It's more likely that he pointed at the stars with his pointer finger, saving his middle finger to point at the Inquisition. The church didn't officially apologize for its treatment of Galileo until 1992, 350 years after his death.